What's up guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to talk about how I was able to secure an early spot on a list for a C8 Z06. And I wanted to explain to you not just how I did it, but also the different ways you can do it too. There's a few different ways you can go about getting on a list for a C8 Z06. And I wanted to explain what the different options are and allow you to decide what works best for you. All right guys, so the first thing that you need to know here is everything I'm going to explain in this video is 100% your mileage may vary. And what I mean by that is you can follow everything that I say in this video and you may or may not actually get a car. You may or may not actually get on the list you want. I'm just giving you the information that I know that it's worked for me and I know it's worked for others. But even if you follow those steps, it's completely on your own of whether or not it actually works. The first thing that you need to know is production for the C8 Z06 is expected to start late this year, late in 2021 as a 2022 model. It may actually not end up being a 2022 model. There are some rumors out there now saying that the 2023 model year might be the first year for the Z06. There are also some people out there saying that maybe the E-Ray, the hybrid version of the Corvette, might actually come out first before the Z06. I don't think that's the case, but some people are saying that. Let's get right into it. Let's talk about the different ways you can get on the list to secure an allocation for a C8 Z06. All right, so first, there are two very specific ways that you can get this done. First, we're gonna talk about the easy way. And the easy way is that you can go and find the list of the dealers that have the most allocations sold for Corvettes year after year. Every year, there is a list published, I believe by the Corvette Museum, that lists the top 100 dealers that sold Corvettes in the prior year. Since 2020 production year is over, you can now go see who sold the most 2020s last year. The top 100 dealers. I'll put this link in the description for you guys. And I will say this, the list is absolutely dominated by two major dealers that sell more Corvettes than almost the entire rest of the 98 on the list combined. And those are the two guys that you probably want to focus some attention on if you're going to choose the easy way. Now, those two dealerships are Corvette, which is in Atlantic City, New Jersey, and McMulkin Chevrolet, which is in New Hampshire. Also on that list, there's a whole lot of other really good, reputable dealerships. I would also mention Les Stanford, which I believe is in Michigan. I would mention Rick Conti is Coughlin Chevrolet in Ohio, really good guy. Mike Davenport in Kentucky, so find him, his name is Chevy Dude online. There's a lot of really good Chevrolet dealers that have sold nationwide for many, many years, that have built their reputation online, and they're going to be very reputable guys because they've really built their reputation on transparency and trying to find great people to partner with all over the country. So the good news is you're going to have really good experiences with these guys. Potentially the bad news is that they're already going to have a long waiting list. So we'll talk about that in a second. But first, I wanted to also mention, don't be afraid that any of these dealerships might not be in the area that you're in. Just because you don't live near one of these dealers, you can order from anywhere in the country. And there's a few different options you can do when it comes to buying a Corvette. And this goes for the Stingray, Z06, E-Ray, ZR1, whichever Corvette you want. This goes the same way. There's a few different options of how you can get those cars delivered to you. First of all, the easy one, obviously, you buy a car, let's say in New Jersey, you fly to New Jersey and you take delivery of the car. You can drive it home wherever you live. That's option one. Option two is you can actually select to have that car delivered at the Corvette Museum. What they'll do is they'll actually build the car per whatever spec you want, and they'll build it and then they'll deliver it over to the Corvette Museum, which is right across the street from their plant in Bowling Green. And then you can have this nice experience of getting it delivered there at the museum, a tour of the museum. They used to do a tour of the factory. I don't know if they're doing that right now, but it was a pretty good experience. So that's option two. I think it's a $1,000 option to do that. Option three is what they call a courtesy delivery. Most dealerships will do a courtesy delivery. So let's say you're buying a car in New Hampshire, but you live in Texas where I am. Well, what you can do is you can tell them, hey, do a courtesy delivery at XYZ Chevrolet here in Texas. They will call that dealer here in Texas, arrange for that courtesy delivery. Usually you'll pay a few $100s to that delivering dealership in Texas just because of their time and effort. They've got to do the pre-delivery inspection. They've got to do all this other stuff. Labor goes into it. So they're going to charge usually a few $100s for that. The fourth option is, well, you could order the car from New Hampshire or Michigan, and then you can have a transportation company, let's say Reliable Carriers or just some private company that moves cars, pick up the car for you and drive it down to your house. So that's the other option as well. So those are your options. So don't be afraid to look in other cities, look in other states, look at some of these national high volume dealers. That's option number one. The reason why option number one is great is because you are guaranteed to get a car. If you call one of these guys, they will probably ask for a deposit. I know they'll ask for a deposit, and they will put you on a list, and you will get a car, and you will get that car at sticker price. No questions asked. These guys have such a reputation. They are absolutely not going to mess with you. The downside to that is, as I mentioned earlier, their lists are really, really long. Some of these guys, their lists are already in the hundreds. Now, when you look at that list that I put in the description of the number of deliveries, the two on the top, they delivered something like 900 and 800 Stingrays last year, respectively. And they usually will expect to produce 20 to 25% of the Corvette volume, and the allocations will be Z06s in future years. So you could kind of estimate that, let's say the highest volume dealer is going to, maybe they'll give them 1,000 allocations next year for 2022. If, let's say, 25% of those end up being Z06s, that means that dealership, which is Kerbeck in New Jersey, let's just say they'll get 250 allocations for Z06s next year. So here's how that would work. You would call them, you would say, I want to get on the list for the Z06. They'd be like, fantastic. But here's the problem. There's not any actual allocations. This car doesn't actually exist yet. So you can't actually place an order. But what they will do is they'll put you on their waiting list. To get on that waiting list, you have to give them a deposit. I think it's $2,000. I'm not sure. You might want to check with them. And so for that $2,000, you get put on a waiting list. And then you're actually just literally waiting. And that waiting list right now might be anywhere between 400 and 600 cars deep. Remember, they only get about 250 a year. So let's say out of those 500, 100 of them fall off. So that brings it down to 400. Well, at 400, you're still not going to get a car the first year because they're only going to get 250 allocations for their 400 orders they have on their wait list. So that's kind of the bad news, and that would be the same with all of those other dealerships I mentioned. They've built their reputation so well that they have so many people calling them, which is fantastic for them. I would never say anything bad about any of those dealerships. But as a buyer, you just have to be aware that you're putting down a deposit on something that, first of all, doesn't exist yet, hasn't been announced. Then we have no idea when it's going to start getting built. And once it starts getting built, you're not going to get a car that first year. You have to wait to the second year. So could be a chance where you're putting down a deposit right now and you may not get that call for a car to place an order for, 2 years. And so you just have to be aware of that. That's the easy option, but there's the pros and the cons. Pros, you will get a car. It will be at sticker price, will be a good transaction, will be a good experience. The con is you got to put down that deposit and you got to wait for a long time. Here's the second option. The second option is you're going to have to contact a bunch of dealerships. The second option takes work, but it could be rewarding. So here's what I would do. This is what I did. So this worked for me for a few different dealerships. I'm actually on multiple lists. I'm number 1 at 2 different dealers. I'm number 4 at 1 dealer, and I'm number 25 at 1 dealer. All of these dealers are within about 50 miles of me. And so here's what I did is I didn't want to screw with going to another state to contact a small local or regional dealer. I contacted every Chevrolet dealer within about 100 miles. So that is the entire San Antonio metro area, that's the entire Austin metro area, and everywhere in between. There are like 1,000 Chevy dealers in the United States. So don't be afraid to call a bunch of them. You can call those top 5 or 10, but don't be afraid to call everyone near you. A lot of them are not well known on the internet, so they may sell 20 or 30 Corvettes a year. You just may not know that. So call them. And so make that list of all the dealerships, all the Chevrolet dealerships within about 100-mile radius. Maybe go to the next big city and get a list of all those as well. So here's what you want to do. You want to call them, and you need this, or email them, or however you're getting a hold of them, and be very specific. Say, I want to get on your waiting list for the C8 Z06. Now, you might get a few different responses. The first response you'll probably get from about half of them is literally nothing. You'll call them and then someone will have to check with somebody else, and then they'll just never call you back because the car doesn't exist or they don't know. Or you'll email them, they'll never email you back. Or they might email you or call you and they're gonna try to sell you either just a Stingray, or they're gonna try to sell you on like a used car or a Tahoe. I had one dealership ask me if I wanted to buy a Tahoe instead. I don't know why. So once you get that list, those guys, get them out of the way, right? So now you have a few left. You might have your list down to like 20, 25. I would recommend contacting between 25 and 50 dealerships, the closest ones to you. Obviously, depending on where you live, there might be more, there might be less, but contact about the 25 at least closest dealerships to you, or anywhere within 100 miles if you live in in an area that has a lot of dealerships. So contact them and say, I want to get on the list for your C8 Z06. So if half of them either don't respond or respond with a bunch of BS, the other half will come back to you and say, well, let's have this conversation, right? So out of that half, you might be, let's say you're down to, let's say 20 dealerships. Out of that, a handful of them will say, the only thing I can do is put you on the list for a Stingray because the Z06 doesn't exist. And so I can put you on the list for a Stingray because everyone's got a wait list. I don't care how small of a dealership, they all have a wait list. I would recommend, if they ask that, say, okay, if I get on the list for the Stingray and my time comes up, then can I move my spot over to the Z06 spot? Or can I call you back? Can I get on the list now for the Stingray and then call you once that car's announced and then talk to you again about the Z06? 99% of them will say, yes, let's do that. Let's get you on the list for the Stingray. At least you can do that. Now, most dealerships, if you're in that position and you're getting on the list for the Stingray, will do so with no deposit. Most of them will. Some won't, but most of them will. And then when they come back and they start that conversation, you need to say, okay, I want to know how many Stingray allocations did you get for 2020 and how many deliveries of Stingrays did you actually make in 2020? Now, what that'll give you an idea of is how many cars they get, how many allocations that they get in a year. A dealership has to have a certain amount of allocations before they can sell a certain car. You can't just call them and say, hey, I want 20 Corvettes, and they order 20 Corvettes. They're not going to do that. Let's say they only get 20 allocations for a year. They're going to let you have one. They only get 3 Z06s. You can only have one, right? So that's how it works. So once you get that list, divide that number by, let's say, 4. That's probably going to be the max amount of Z06s that they'll get. And so you just kind of know. So maybe those smaller local dealerships will get anywhere between 1 and maybe 7 or 8 Z06 allocations in a year. So you just need to do that math of whether or not they have the allocations or not. And if, let's say they sell 20 cars a year, you can expect maybe 5 of those next year will be Z06s. If they have 3 guys on their list and you want to put down a deposit and you're most likely going to get a first year car then go for it. Okay, the steps are, do you have a wait list? How many allocations did you have for 2020? How many deliveries did you make for 2020? And then do the math saying 25% of those deliveries, not allocations, but deliveries, are likely going to be how many Z06s they get next year. So do that math. Now, once you do all of that, now you can start talking about that wait list. Now you say, hey, how many people are on your wait list? And let's say the dealership sells 20 cars in a year, they deliver 20 cars in a year, they're gonna have, let's say, 4 or 5 Z06s. They may only have 1 or 2 people on their wait list because these guys aren't getting floods of people from the internet calling them. So you may be the first person that has ever called them and asked them about a Z06. most of the dealerships I contacted a few months back, that was the case. They said, heck, you're the first person who's ever called about the Z06. Absolutely, you can be first on my list. And of the ones that were making lists already. So it's that easy. It's hard because you have to put the list together. It's easy because you may be the first person or one or two people that have contacted them about the Z06 list. And a lot of these smaller dealerships aren't requiring deposits, which then allows you to get on multiple lists pretty easily. The reason why you'd want to get on multiple lists is because a dealership may tell you they're going to sell you at MSRP, and then they don't. Don't get into that situation. If you ever get to the point where you can put something in paper, even if it's an email transcription of saying that I'm going to sell it to you at sticker price, do it. But then once you get to where you're actually placing the order, so they can't do that yet. So don't let any dealership say you can place an order now. But once you're actually placing a real order that goes into the GM Workbench system, make sure you have in writing that the sale price will be at MSRP. And then you at least have that going for you. Don't just like guess and have them say it and it's not in writing, because we have too many horror stories of people who took delivery of their 2020s, and by the time they took delivery, the price got jacked up to $20,000 over sticker because that was the market rate. And they say, sorry, go pound sand because you don't have anything in writing saying that I said I was going to sell it to you for sticker price. So definitely, once you get to that point where they've announced the car and the dealership is placing a real order in the computer system, get it on paper that they're going to sell it to you at sticker price. So those are your two options, guys. Your one is go to one of the high volume dealerships, get on their list. You will get a car. It will be at sticker price. Negatives, you will have to put down a deposit, and you will have to wait a long time, potentially 2 years, before it's your turn on the list. The other option is go with smaller dealerships. Don't go like with a guy that only sells like one Corvette a year, but go with the local guys that sell, I don't know, between 8 and 20 or 25 Corvettes a year. That means they will get a handful of Z06 allocations, and there's a very good chance you're the first person that's ever asked them about the Z06 because they're not advertising stuff online. So call the closest 20 to 50 dealerships near you, depending on, of course, the population density of your area, but anything within 100 miles. Get a huge list together, get all the dealership names, get their phone number, get their website, whatever it is, and contact all of them. Contact them and say, are you making a list for the C8 Z06? If so, I want on it. How many allocations did you get for 2020 Stingray? How many deliveries did you make for 2020 Stingray? And then do the math of 25% of those deliveries is likely an estimated amount of how many Z06s they might get in 2022. Then find out how many people are on their Z06 list now, and then it's a simple math equation. If they're gonna get 8 Z06s in 2022, and they only have 3 people on their list, get on their list. You can be number 4 on their list, probably not need a deposit, and then your time will come and they'll give you a call. So that is what I did. I chose to not go with the large national dealerships because of the deposit and because of the wait. And I just did a huge campaign and contacted tons of these local and regional dealers. And I got bites from quite a few. I got on the list for 4 for Z06s. And I got on the list for, I think, 3 others that were just Stingray lists. One of those Stingray lists actually was the dealership that I'm actually buying my Stingray from here in a couple of weeks. So I got on their list. It was my turn for the Stingray. I said, let's just get the Stingray, right? I don't know what's going on with the Z06. Let's get the Stingray. And then what I plan on doing is hopefully when that Z06 can be ordered, probably late this year or next year, then if that comes in, then I'll probably sell the Stingray for whatever it's worth. There's a good chance I'll be able to get my money back. So that's my strategy. So hopefully this helped you guys. I really, really think this helps a lot of people. There's too many people online on Facebook groups, on forums, and on the internet just saying, how do I do this? And, everyone's got to wait 2 or 3 years. And, it's going to be 50,000 over sticker. And, just fear mongering. And that is not true. You just have to know how to work the system to get yourself a spot on the Z06 waiting list at your local dealers. Hopefully this helps. If it did, definitely give me a like. Definitely share this video and subscribe. And hopefully I'll get my Stingray here in about 3 or 4 weeks. And then we'll have a lot more cool C8 content. But until then, guys, adios.